The sun was just starting to rise over the quiet suburban neighborhood. Soft rays of light peeked through the trees, casting long shadows across manicured lawns and flower beds. Birds chirped lazily in the distance, and the air smelled fresh, with a hint of dew. It was the kind of morning that made people feel calm, like nothing bad could ever happen here. Kelly Harper stood in her front yard, wearing an old straw hat and gloves as she watered her garden. Her hands moved carefully, between rows of tomatoes, peppers, and herbs. She loved this time of day, just her, the plants, and the peaceful hum of nature waking up. Behind her, the house sat neatly tucked behind white picket fencing, its windows catching the golden sunlight. Inside the house, Jack Harper sat at the kitchen table, sharpening one of his many knives. He wasn't doing anything urgent. It was more of a habit than anything else. The rhythmic scrape of metal against stone filled the room, blending with the faint sound of Kelly humming outside. Jack paused for a moment, glancing toward the window. Even though he'd retired years ago, he still carried himself with the same quiet confidence that had earned him respect, and maybe even fear, during his time in the Marines. Now he mostly kept to himself, enjoying life's simple pleasures, alongside Kelly. Neither of them noticed the black SUVs pulling up quietly along the curb outside their home. They didn't hear the soft thud of boots hitting pavement, or see the dark figures moving swiftly toward their property. By the time Kelly turned around, it was already too late. "Freeze!" a voice barked, loud and sharp enough to startle her. She dropped the watering can, turning to face the source of the noise. A group of men dressed in tactical gear surrounded her, weapons raised and pointed directly at her chest. Their faces were hidden behind helmets and visors, making them look less like humans and more like machines. What is this?" Kelly stammered, holding her gloved hands up instinctively. Her heart raced as adrenaline surged through her body. "What are you doing here?" One of the officers stepped forward, his voice cold and commanding. "We have reason to believe there are illegal weapons stored on this property. Step back from the garden and get down on your knees." "I'm sorry," Kelly said quickly, trying to stay calm despite the panic rising in her throat. "You must have the wrong house. We don't have any weapons. My husband served in the military, but we're just regular people now. Please, let me explain." But the officer cut her off. "Ma'am, if you do not comply immediately, we will be forced to take action." Jack heard the commotion from inside the house. At first he thought it might be kids playing some prank. They weren't uncommon in this part of town. But when he recognized the tone of authority in the voices, his instincts kicked in. Moving silently, he grabbed a baseball bat leaning against the wall near the door and stepped out onto the porch. The scene before him stopped him in his tracks. There was Kelly, standing frozen in the middle of her beloved garden, surrounded by armed men who looked ready to shoot at the slightest provocation. Anger flared in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Raising his hands slowly so they could see he wasn't holding anything threatening, he called out, "What's going on here?" For a brief moment, all eyes shifted to him. Some of the officers hesitated, unsure how to respond to the towering figure standing on the porch. Others tightened their grips on their weapons, clearly prepared for whatever came next. "This is a restricted area," one of them shouted back, pointing, his rifle toward Jack. "Stay where you are, sir." Jack ignored the command, taking a step forward instead. His movements were deliberate, measured, and radiated a kind of quiet power that made even the most seasoned members of the SWAT team uneasy. "That's my wife," he said, his voice low but firm. "And unless you've got a warrant, you're trespassing on private property." The lead officer hesitated, glancing at the papers in his hand. Whether or not they actually had legal grounds to search the house didn't matter right now. They were following orders, and backing down wasn't an option. "Sir," he repeated, louder this time, "I need you to remain where you are. Do not interfere." But Jack wasn't listening anymore. His attention snapped back to Kelly when he saw one of the officers approach her aggressively. She tried to step away, but the man grabbed her arm roughly, twisting it behind her back. "Stop resisting," he growled, shoving her to the ground. Time seemed to slow down for Jack. He watched as Kelly hit the dirt, her hat falling off and landing beside her. For a split second, no one moved. Then, without warning, the officer pulled out a taser and fired. 2 prongs struck Kelly in the side, sending electric shocks coursing through her body. She cried out once before collapsing completely, her body going limp. Something inside Jack snapped. He didn't yell. He didn't charge at them. Instead, he stood perfectly still, his gaze locked onto the officer who had fired the taser. The man faltered under the weight of Jack's stare, suddenly unsure of himself. Everyone else froze too, sensing that something had changed. "You should have knocked first," Jack said finally, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. It wasn't loud, but it carried a kind of authority that couldn't be ignored. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the birds had stopped chirping, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Jack took another step forward, lowering his hands slightly. His expression never changed, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of something ancient, something dangerous. The SWAT team, trained to handle high-pressure situations, found themselves paralyzed by uncertainty. Who was this man? What had they stumbled into? Behind him, the front door creaked open again. Someone else had come outside, a neighbor maybe, drawn by the commotion. But Jack barely noticed. All he cared about right now was Kelly. Crossing the yard in long strides, he knelt beside her and gently rolled her onto her back. Her eyes were closed, but she was breathing steadily, still alive. As he checked her pulse, Jack glanced up at the officers surrounding them. "You'll regret this," he said softly, his tone leaving no room for doubt. And for the first time since arriving, the SWAT team truly believed him. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jack Harper knelt beside Kelly, his hands steady as he checked her breathing and pulse. She was unconscious but stable, the taser's effects wearing off slowly. Around them, the SWAT team stood frozen, their weapons still aimed at Jack, though none of them seemed eager to pull the trigger. Something about him, his calm demeanor, his piercing gaze, had thrown them off balance. Jack didn't say another word. He simply scooped Kelly into his arms and carried her to the porch, laying her gently on the wooden steps. Then he turned, back to face the officers, his expression unreadable. For a moment, no one moved. The only sounds were the distant chirping of birds and the faint rustling of leaves in the breeze. Finally, one of the officers stepped forward, trying to regain control of the situation. "Sir," he said, his voice wavering slightly, "we're here because of credible intel suggesting illegal activity on this property. If you cooperate, we can resolve this peacefully." Jack stared at him for a long moment before responding. His voice was quiet, almost conversational, but it carried an edge that made everyone uneasy. "Credible intel? From who? Someone who saw me watering my garden? Or maybe someone who heard my wife baking cookies last night?" The officer hesitated, glancing at his teammates. None of them had expected resistance like this, or rather, they hadn't expected him. There was something unnerving about Jack Harper, something that went beyond his imposing physique or military background. It was as if he knew something they didn't, something that gave him an unshakable confidence. Before anyone could respond, a murmur rippled through the group of officers. One of them leaned over to whisper to another, his voice low but audible. "Isn't this the guy from Alaska? The one they talk about in training?" Another nodded nervously. "Yeah. The artifact. Mission, I thought that was just a story." Jack's ears caught the exchange, and a faint smile tugged at the corners of his lips. He didn't confirm or deny anything. He just kept staring at the lead officer, waiting. The mention of the artifact had clearly rattled the SWAT team, and Jack knew exactly why. What they didn't know was how much of the story was true, and how much of it involved him personally. Detective Laura Evans arrived a few minutes later, having been called in to oversee the operation. She climbed out of her car, adjusting her jacket as she surveyed the scene. Laura was in her mid-30s, sharp-eyed and quick-thinking, with a reputation for solving cases others deemed unsolvable. When she saw Jack standing calmly on the porch, While surrounded by armed officers, her curiosity piqued immediately. "What's going on here?" she asked, striding toward the group. Her tone was firm but not aggressive, designed to project authority without escalating the situation further. One of the officers quickly briefed her, explaining the supposed tip about illegal weapons and the confrontation that had followed. Laura listened intently, her eyes flicking between Jack and the prone figure of Kelly on the porch. Something about the whole scenario felt off. She approached Jack cautiously, holding up her badge. "Mr. Harper, I'm Detective Laura Evans. Can we talk for a moment?" Jack studied her for a second before nodding. "Sure, but first tell your people to stand down. My wife is hurt and I don't appreciate being treated like a criminal." Laura hesitated, then signaled for the SWAT team to lower their weapons. They complied reluctantly, keeping a wary eye on Jack as they stepped back. Satisfied, Jack gestured for Laura to join him on the porch. She sat down a few feet away, pulling out a small notebook. "I understand you're upset," she began, choosing her words carefully. "But these kinds of tips need to be investigated. If you have nothing to hide, you'll have nothing to worry about." Jack chuckled dryly. "Nothing to hide, huh? Tell that to my wife." He glanced at Kelly, who was starting to stir. "Look, Detective, I get it. You're just doing your job. But whoever sent you here made a big mistake." Laura tilted her head, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Jack leaned back, resting his elbows on the porch railing. "Let's start with the obvious. This isn't about weapons. Not really. Whoever tipped you off wanted you to come barging in here, guns blazing, hoping you'd provoke a reaction. And guess what? It worked." Laura frowned. "Are you saying this was a setup?" "Exactly." Jack's voice hardened. "Someone knows what I am, or at least what they think I am. They're testing me, seeing how far they can push before I snap." Laura opened her mouth to ask another question, but Kelly groaned softly, drawing both their attention. Her eyes fluttered open and she blinked against the sunlight. "Jack," she murmured, her voice weak but steady. "I'm here," Jack said, reaching over to help her sit up. "Take it easy, you're okay." Kelly looked around, confusion written all over her face. "What happened? Why are there so many people in our yard?" "It's a misunderstanding," Jack replied, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "We'll sort it out." Laura watched the interaction closely, noting the tenderness in Jack's gestures. Whatever else he might be, he clearly cared deeply for his wife. That softened her skepticism, at least a little. "Mr. Harper," she said after a pause, "if you're willing to cooperate, we can clear this up quickly. Let us search the house, and once we find nothing, we'll leave you alone." Jack shook his head. "Not happening. Not until you tell me where that tip came from." Laura sighed. "I don't have that information yet, but I can look into it. In the meantime, refusing to let us search will only make things worse." Jack considered this for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Fine, search the house, but I'm coming with you, and if anything gets damaged, you're paying for it." Laura agreed, signaling for two officers to accompany them inside. As they walked through the door, Jack paused briefly, glancing back at Kelly. She gave him a reassuring smile, though her eyes betrayed her lingering fear. Inside, the house was tidy and unremarkable, a typical suburban home. The officers began their search methodically, checking closets, drawers, and even the attic. Jack followed silently, his presence making everyone uncomfortable. Every now and then, Laura would try to engage him in conversation, asking about his past or his connection to the rumored artifact. Jack deflected most of her questions with vague answers, but when she pressed him about Alaska, he finally spoke up. "That mission changed everything," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I found something out there. Something ancient. It gave me abilities, but it also bound me to a responsibility. Protecting this planet from threats most people can't even imagine." Laura stared at him, unsure whether to believe him or dismiss his words as delusions. Before she could decide, one of the officers called out from the basement, "Detective, you need to see this." They hurried downstairs, where the officer was pointing at a trapdoor embedded in the floor. It was old and weathered, almost blending into the woodwork, Jack's jaw tightened as he realized what they'd found. "That's private," he said sharply. "You don't want to open that." Laura crossed her arms. "And why not?" "Because whatever's down there doesn't belong to you," Jack replied. "It's dangerous. Trust me on this." For a moment, Laura wavered. Then she nodded to the officer who pried the trap door open. A narrow staircase led downward into darkness. Jack exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You've made your choice," he muttered. "Now you'll have to deal with the consequences." As they descended, the air grew colder, heavier. At the bottom, they found a small chamber lit by a faint, eerie green glow. In the center of the room sat an object unlike anything Laura had ever seen. A smooth, metallic sphere etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and shimmer under the light. It pulsed rhythmically, as if alive. "What is this?" Laura whispered, her voice trembling. Jack stepped forward, placing a protective hand on the sphere. "This," he said, "is why you shouldn't have come here." The glow from the sphere filled the small basement chamber, casting strange shadows on the walls. Detective Laura Evans stood frozen, her eyes wide as she stared at the mysterious object. It was unlike anything she had ever encountered in her years as a detective. The patterns etched into its surface seemed to move like liquid, shifting and swirling as though alive. A faint hum vibrated through the air, making her skin tingle. Jack Harper stood beside the sphere, his hand resting lightly on its surface. His expression was calm, but there was a deep sadness in his eyes, as if he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. He didn't look at Laura or the officers behind her. Instead, he focused on the artifact, his fingers tracing one of the glowing patterns. "This is what you came for," Jack said quietly, breaking the silence. "But you don't understand what it is, or what it means." Laura swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice. "What is it?" she asked again, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "It's an alien artifact," Jack replied simply. "I found it years ago during a classified mission in Alaska. It's not just a piece of technology, it's alive in a way, and it chose me." "Chose you?" Laura echoed, her brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" Jack sighed, stepping back from the sphere. "When I touched it for the first time, something happened. It gave me abilities, strength, speed, healing, but it also bound me to a purpose, protecting Earth from threats most people can't even imagine." One of the officers scoffed, shaking his head. "Aliens? Really? This has to be some kind of prank." Jack turned to face him, his gaze sharp and unyielding. "You think this is a joke? Fine. Keep doubting, but when the sky turns black and ships descend from above, don't say I didn't warn you." Laura held up a hand, silencing the officer before he could respond. She studied Jack carefully, weighing his words against the evidence in front of her. The sphere pulsed gently, almost in rhythm with her heartbeat. There was no denying that it was real, and it was extraordinary. "Why didn't you report this?" she asked finally. "If what you're saying is true, this isn't something you should keep hidden." "I didn't have a choice," Jack said, his tone heavy with regret. "The government tried to take it from me after the mission. They wanted to study it, weaponize it, but they couldn't control it, not without destroying themselves. So I took it and disappeared. I've been watching, waiting, ever since." Laura frowned, glancing at the officers around her. Some of them looked skeptical, while others seemed genuinely frightened. She couldn't blame them. Even she struggled to wrap her mind around what she was hearing. "Watching for what?" she pressed. "For them," Jack replied. "The ones who made this. They'll come for it eventually, and when they do—" He trailed off, his voice dropping to a whisper. "It won't be pretty." Before Laura could ask another question, the sphere let out a sudden, high-pitched whine. Its glow intensified, bathing the room in blinding light. Everyone instinctively shielded their eyes, backing away from the artifact. Jack moved closer instead, placing both hands on its surface. "What are you doing?" Laura demanded, panic creeping into her voice. Trying to calm it down, Jack muttered. "Something's triggered it. Someone must have sent a signal. His words were cut short as the ground beneath them began to tremble. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the walls groaned under the pressure. The officers shouted in alarm, scrambling toward the staircase. Laura hesitated, torn between following them and staying with Jack. "Go!" Jack yelled over the noise. "Get everyone out of here!" Laura shook her head stubbornly. "Not without answers." "There's no time," Jack snapped. "Trust me, detective. You'll get your answers soon enough. Now go." Reluctantly, Laura turned and ran up the stairs, joining the others as they spilled out into the backyard. Behind her, the house shook violently, windows shattering and debris flying everywhere. She spun around just in time to see a massive burst of green light erupt from the basement, sending shockwaves rippling outward. The force knocked everyone off their feet, including Jack, who stumbled out of the wreckage moments later, shielding his face from the dust. "What the hell was that?" one of the officers shouted, coughing as he climbed to his feet. Jack ignored him, rushing over to Kelly, who was still sitting on the porch. She looked pale but alert, clutching her arms tightly around herself. "Are you okay?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her voice shook. "But what about the sphere?" "It's awake," Jack said grimly. "And so are they." As if on cue, the sky above them darkened dramatically, clouds swirling together unnaturally fast. A low rumble echoed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Then, without warning, several sleek metallic objects descended from the heavens, hovering silently overhead. Their surfaces gleamed in the dim light, reflecting the chaos below. The crowd of officers and neighbors stared up in stunned silence, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. Laura felt her stomach drop as realization dawned on her. "Those aren't drones, are they?" "No," Jack replied, his voice barely audible over the rising wind. "They're ships." The largest of the vessels lowered itself closer to the ground, emitting a bright beam of light that illuminated the entire yard. From within the beam, figures emerged. Tall, slender beings with elongated limbs and featureless faces. Their movements were fluid, almost hypnotic as they approached the group. One of the creatures stopped a few feet away from Jack, tilting its head slightly as if studying him. Though it had no visible mouth, a voice resonated in everyone's minds, cold and mechanical. "You possess what belongs to us," it said. "Return it, or face annihilation." Jack stepped forward, positioning himself between the aliens and the others. "You're not getting it," he said firmly. "Not today, not ever." The creature paused, then raised one of its long arms. In an instant, a shimmering energy field enveloped Jack, pinning him in place. He gritted his teeth, straining against the invisible force, but it held him fast. "Jack!" Kelly screamed, lunging toward him. Before she could reach him, however, Laura grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Stay here," Laura ordered. "We need to figure out how to help him." Kelly nodded reluctantly, tears streaming down her face as she watched her husband struggle. Around them, the officers fumbled with their weapons, unsure whether firing would make things worse. None of them had faced anything like this before. Meanwhile, the alien continued to speak, its voice echoing ominously. "Your defiance will cost you dearly. Surrender now or witness the destruction of your species." Jack managed a weak smile despite the strain. Big talk for someone who doesn't know who they're dealing with. With a sudden surge of effort, he broke free from the energy field, staggering forward. The aliens recoiled slightly, clearly surprised by his strength. Taking advantage of their hesitation, Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, a remote control of sorts. He pressed a button, and the sphere in the basement emitted another pulse of green light. The aliens hissed in unison, retreating slightly as the light washed over them. "You cannot win," the lead creature snarled. "This planet will burn." "We'll see about that," Jack shot back, his jaw set with determination. As the standoff continued, Laura realized that they needed reinforcements, and fast. Pulling out her phone, she dialed the local station, her hands trembling. "We need backup," she said urgently. "And call the National Guard. Tell them we've got a situation unlike anything they've seen before." Hanging up, she turned to Kelly, who was still watching Jack anxiously. "He's buying us time," Laura said. "We need to use it wisely." Kelly nodded, wiping her tears. "What do we do?" "Whatever it takes," Laura replied, her voice steady. "Because if we don't stop them, none of us are walking away from this." Above them, the ships hovered menacingly, their presence casting an ominous shadow over the neighborhood. The battle for Earth had begun, and Jack Harper was at the center of it all. The alien ships loomed overhead, their sleek surfaces reflecting the chaos below. The air was thick with tension, and the hum of their engines vibrated through the ground. Jack stood at the center of it all, his body battered but his resolve unshaken. He clutched the small remote device tightly in his hand, ready to use it again if needed. Behind him, Kelly, Laura, and the others watched anxiously, unsure of what would happen next. The lead alien tilted its head slightly, studying Jack with an unsettling stillness. Its voice echoed once more in everyone's minds, cold and emotionless. "You are stronger than we anticipated," it said, "but your resistance is futile. Hand over the artifact or we will eliminate you and everything around you." Jack smirked, though there was no humor in it. "You've got a funny way of asking nicely," he shot back. "But here's the thing, you're not getting it. Not today, not ever." The alien raised one of its long, spindly arms, pointing directly at Jack. A beam of energy shot out, narrowly missing him as he dove to the side. The blast hit the ground where he had been standing, leaving a smoldering crater. Panic erupted among the crowd and people began scattering in every direction. "Everyone get inside!" Laura shouted, ushering Kelly and a few neighbors toward the house. She knew they wouldn't be safe outside, especially with the aliens showing no mercy. But even as she helped them retreat, part of her wanted to stay and fight alongside Jack. He couldn't face this alone. Jack rolled to his feet, brushing dirt off his jacket. His eyes locked onto the aliens, burning with defiance. "You want to fight?" he growled. "Fine, let's dance." Pressing another button on the remote, he activated the sphere again. This time, the pulse of green light was stronger, rippling outward like a shockwave. It struck the alien ships, causing them to shudder violently. One of the smaller vessels faltered, its engines sputtering before it crashed into the nearby woods with a deafening boom. The aliens hissed in anger, their movements becoming more erratic. They clearly hadn't expected Jack to have such control over the artifact or to use it so effectively. Still, they weren't backing down. More beams of energy shot toward him, forcing him to dodge and weave between blasts. From the porch, Laura watched in awe. Jack moved with incredible speed and precision, almost as if he were anticipating the aliens' attacks before they happened. She realized then that the artifact hadn't just given him strength, it had enhanced his reflexes and instincts too. But even with those abilities, he couldn't hold them off forever. "We need to help him," Laura muttered under her breath. Turning to Kelly, who was gripping the railing tightly, she asked, "Is there anything else in the house? Any tools or weapons we can use?" Kelly shook her head. "Just gardening tools and kitchen knives. Nothing that'll stop them." Laura frowned, thinking quickly. Then her eyes landed on the garage. "What about vehicles? Do you have anything in there?" "We've got Matt's truck," Kelly replied. "He's our neighbor. He's always tinkering with it." "Why?" An idea sparked in Laura's mind. "Do you think he'd let us borrow it? If we can modify it somehow, maybe we can distract the aliens long enough for Jack to figure something out." Kelly hesitated, then nodded. "I'll go ask him." As Kelly ran off, Laura turned to the remaining officers. Most of them were huddled near the house, looking terrified. "Listen up," she called out. "We can't just sit here and watch. Grab whatever you can find, tools, pipes, anything heavy, and meet me at the garage. We're building ourselves a distraction." The officers exchanged nervous glances, but eventually nodded, following her instructions. Within minutes, they had gathered a makeshift collection of supplies and headed to the garage, where Matt was already working on his truck. He was a burly man in his 40s with grease-stained hands and a determined expression. "What's the plan?" Matt asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "We need to make your truck loud, fast, and hard to miss," Laura explained. "Can you rig it with some kind of smokescreen or flares?" Anything to draw their attention away from Jack. Matt grinned. Leave it to me. While Matt worked on the truck, Laura and the others scoured the garage for additional materials. They found old propane tanks, spare metal sheets, and even a few fireworks left over from the 4th of July. With Matt's guidance, they attached the items to the truck, creating a chaotic but effective setup. By the time they were done, the truck looked like something out of a Mad Max movie. Smoke billowed from the exhaust pipe and sparks flew whenever Matt revved the engine. Satisfied, he climbed into the driver's seat while Laura took the passenger side. "Ready?" she asked, gripping the dashboard tightly. "As I'll ever be," Matt replied, slamming his foot on the gas pedal. The truck roared to life, speeding out of the driveway and straight toward the alien ships. The aliens immediately turned their attention to the noisy vehicle, firing beams of energy that missed by inches. Matt swerved wildly, dodging each attack while triggering bursts of smoke and flames from the rigged-up contraptions. The distraction worked. The aliens focused entirely on the truck, giving Jack a chance to regroup. Jack used the moment wisely. He sprinted back to the basement, ignoring the debris and dust filling the air. Reaching the chamber, he knelt beside the glowing sphere. Placing both hands on its surface, he closed his eyes and concentrated. The patterns etched into the artifact pulsed faster, responding to his touch. "I know what you are," he whispered, "and I know what you can do. Help me protect them." For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then the sphere emitted a blinding flash of light, enveloping Jack completely. When the light faded, he felt different, stronger, sharper, more connected to the artifact than ever before. It was as if the sphere had unlocked something deep within him, amplifying his abilities to their fullest potential. Back outside, the aliens had destroyed the truck, leaving Matt and Laura scrambling for cover. They ducked behind a pile of rubble. As the creatures advanced, their weapons trained on the survivors. "This isn't working," Laura muttered, clutching her gun tightly. "We need another plan." Before she could think of one, a voice rang out across the yard. "Hey, Ugly!" Everyone turned to see Jack stepping out of the wreckage of the house, his posture confident and his eyes blazing with determination. In his hand, he held the remote device, now glowing faintly with the same green light as the sphere. "You want this?" he taunted, holding up the remote. "Come and get it." The aliens charged forward, their movements swift and precise. But Jack was ready. Using his newfound strength and speed, he darted between them, striking with calculated precision. Each blow sent the creatures stumbling backward, their sleek forms cracking under the force of his attacks. Meanwhile, Laura spotted an opportunity. Grabbing a discarded crowbar, she hurled it at one of the aliens, hitting it squarely in the chest. The creature staggered, giving Jack the opening he needed to deliver a final blow. One by one, the aliens fell, until only the lead creature remained. It stood tall, its featureless face tilted toward Jack. "You cannot win," it hissed. "Our fleet is vast. Your planet will fall." Jack stepped closer, his voice steady. "Maybe, but I'll take as many of you down with me as I can." With that, he pressed the final button on the remote. The sphere reacted instantly, sending a massive pulse of energy surging upward. The alien ships above shuddered violently, their systems overloaded by the sudden surge. One by one, they exploded in brilliant bursts of light, raining fiery debris across the sky. The lead alien let out a piercing shriek before collapsing to the ground, its form dissolving into ash. Silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the crackling of flames and the distant wail of sirens. Breathing heavily, Jack dropped to one knee, exhaustion washing over him. The artifact's glow dimmed, retreating back into its core. He had pushed himself and the sphere to their limits, and now he could feel the toll it had taken. "Jack!" Kelly cried, running to his side. She knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face as she hugged him tightly. "Are you okay?" He managed a weak smile. "Yeah, just tired." Laura approached cautiously, her gun lowered. "That was incredible," she said, shaking her head in disbelief. "What happens now?" Jack glanced at the sphere, which now lay dormant in the basement. "Now we wait. They'll be back, but next time we'll be ready." As the first responders arrived, the survivors gathered together, their faces etched with relief and gratitude. They didn't fully understand what had happened or how close they had come to disaster, but they knew one thing for certain: Jack Harper had saved them all. And somewhere deep inside, Jack knew the fight was far from over. The sun rose slowly over the neighborhood, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Smoke still lingered in the air, curling lazily from the wreckage of alien ships scattered across the landscape. The quiet hum of recovery efforts filled the space where chaos had reigned just hours before. Emergency vehicles lined the streets, their flashing lights casting an eerie glow on the damaged houses and scorched lawns. It was a scene that would haunt the town for years to come. Jack Harper sat on the porch steps, his elbows resting on his knees as he stared at the horizon. His body ached from the battle, but it wasn't just physical pain weighing him down. It was the knowledge that this was only the beginning. The aliens might have retreated for now, but they weren't gone. Not completely. And when they returned, they wouldn't come alone. Kelly sat beside him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough to remind him why he fought so hard, to protect her, their home, and everyone else who couldn't defend themselves against forces beyond comprehension. Detective Laura Evans walked up the driveway carrying a steaming cup of coffee. She handed it to Jack without a word, sitting down on the other side of him. For a moment, none of them spoke, content to watch the sunrise together. Finally, Laura broke the silence. "What happens next?" she asked softly, glancing at Jack, took a sip of the coffee, grimacing slightly at the bitterness. "We wait," he replied, "and we prepare." Laura frowned. "Prepare how? You can't do this alone, Jack. Whatever those things were, they're not going to stop because of one victory." "I know," Jack said, his voice steady, "but I've got time. They'll regroup, rebuild, and try again. Until then, I'll figure out what I need to do." "And what about us?" Kelly interjected, her voice trembling. "What are we supposed to do while you're preparing for whatever comes next?" Jack turned to look at her, his eyes softening. "You live your life. You take care of each other. That's all I want, for you to be safe no matter what happens." Kelly opened her mouth to protest but stopped herself. She knew arguing wouldn't change his mind. Instead, she leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. Laura watched them quietly, feeling both admiration and sorrow for the couple. They had been through so much already, yet here they were, still standing. A short distance away, Matt and a few neighbors were helping clean up the debris. Some of the officers who had survived the attack were assisting too, though many looked shaken by what they had witnessed. No one spoke openly about the events of the night. They didn't need to. Everyone knew their lives had changed forever. As the morning wore on, reporters began arriving, eager to document the strange phenomena that had occurred in the small suburban town. Cameras flashed, microphones were thrust toward anyone willing to talk, and questions flew thick and fast. Laura stepped in to manage the situation, ensuring that sensitive information about Jack and the artifact remained under wraps. By midday, the crowd had grown restless. People wanted answers, but there weren't many to give. Official statements blamed the destruction on a freak meteor shower or military exercises gone wrong, anything to avoid admitting the truth. Jack stayed out of sight, letting Laura handle the media frenzy. He knew exposure would only make things worse. That evening, after most of the reporters had left and the cleanup efforts had slowed, Jack returned to the basement. The sphere lay silent in its chamber, its green glow dimmed to a faint flicker. He knelt beside it, placing a hand on its surface. Though it seemed dormant, he could feel a faint vibration beneath his palm, like the heartbeat of something ancient and powerful. "You've done enough for today," Kelly said from the doorway, her arms crossed tightly around herself. "Come upstairs. Rest." Jack hesitated, then nodded. Standing up, he followed her back to the living room where Laura and a few trusted neighbors had gathered. Matt was tinkering with a radio, trying to pick up any unusual signals, while Rachel the nurse who had helped treat minor injuries earlier, was organizing supplies into neat piles. "We're not giving up," Laura announced firmly, looking around the room. "If Jack says they'll be back, then we believe him. And if they come back, we'll be ready." Jack raised an eyebrow, surprised by her determination. "You don't have to fight this battle with me," he said. "It's not your responsibility." "It is now," Laura shot back. "You saved us last night. Now it's our turn to help you." The others nodded in agreement, their expressions resolute. Jack felt a lump rise in his throat. These people, ordinary men and women with no combat training or special abilities, were willing to risk everything to stand by his side. It was humbling and terrifying all at once. Over the next few days, the group worked tirelessly to fortify the neighborhood. Matt modified more vehicles, turning them into makeshift armored trucks equipped with smoke screens and reinforced plating. Rachel set up a first aid station in her garage, stocking it with medical supplies donated by local clinics. Even the children pitched in, collecting scrap metal and tools to repurpose for defense. Jack spent hours teaching them basic self-defense techniques and strategies for dealing with potential threats. He emphasized teamwork, reminding them that strength came not from individual power but from unity. Despite their lack of experience, they learned quickly, driven by the knowledge that failure wasn't an option. One night, as the group gathered in Jack and Kelly's backyard to review their progress, a low rumble echoed in the distance. Everyone froze, their eyes darting toward the sky. The sound grew louder, accompanied by a faint green glow spreading across the horizon. "They're here," Jack said quietly, his voice cutting through the tension. "Get to your positions." No one argued. Without hesitation, they sprang into action, moving with practiced efficiency. Matt climbed into his modified truck, revving the engine as he positioned himself near the edge of the property. Rachel grabbed a backpack filled with medical supplies and headed for the first aid station. Laura joined Jack and Kelly on the porch, her gun drawn and ready. Above them, the alien ships descended once more, their sleek forms gleaming ominously in the moonlight. This time, however, they weren't alone. Dozens of smaller drones flanked, the vessels buzzing like angry hornets as they prepared to strike. Jack pressed a button on the remote, activating the sphere. Its glow intensified, bathing the yard in light. He raised his voice, addressing the invaders. "You wanted a fight? Here it is." With a deafening roar, the sphere unleashed a massive pulse of energy, striking the lead ship and sending it spiraling out of control. The drones swarmed forward, firing beams of energy at the defenders below. But the group was ready. Matt drove straight into the fray, using his truck to ram several drones out of the sky. Others used improvised weapons, baseball bats wrapped in barbed wire, Molotov cocktails, even fireworks rigged to launchers, to fend off the attackers. Amidst the chaos, Jack stood tall, his connection to the sphere granting him unparalleled speed and strength. He moved like a storm, striking down every drone that came within reach. Yet even with his enhanced abilities, he couldn't hold them off indefinitely. "Jack!" Kelly shouted, throwing him a crowbar she had picked up during the fight. He caught it mid-air, spinning around to smash another drone to pieces. Laura fired her gun repeatedly, taking down several drones before running out of ammunition. Cursing under her breath, she grabbed a piece of broken fence post and swung it wildly, keeping the remaining drones at bay. The battle raged on for what felt like hours, though in reality it lasted mere minutes. One by one the drones fell, their metallic bodies shattering upon impact with the ground. The alien ships, damaged by the sphere's energy pulses, began retreating, disappearing into the night sky. When the last drone hit the ground, silence fell over the battlefield. Exhausted but victorious, the group gathered together, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat. Jack surveyed the damage, his chest rising and falling rapidly as he caught his breath. "We did it," Matt said, grinning, despite the fatigue etched into his features. "We actually did it." "For now," Jack corrected, his tone somber. "They'll be back, stronger, smarter. We need to keep improving." Rachel nodded, wiping blood from a cut on her forehead. "Then we will. Together." As dawn broke, the survivors stood united, their bond forged in fire and sacrifice. They knew the road ahead would be long and perilous, but they also knew they weren't alone. With Jack leading the way and the mysterious artifact watching over them, they would face whatever came next. In the distance, the faintest trace of green light lingered on the horizon, a reminder of the battles yet to come. But for now they allowed themselves a moment of peace, knowing they had earned it.